Good to be able to discuss these interesting topics. Jamsaling International Broadcasting Service in collaboration with Jamyang League. Yeah, so here we are surrounded by the beautiful woods and hills of the White Carpathian Mountains, or hills I would call them really, especially notable for its beautiful wildflowers, I think, at this time of year. So great pleasure to see everybody, especially those old friends or old people from Leeds I hadn't seen for years, like Dawn, for instance. He's a veteran, a Leeds veteran. Yeah, okay, good. So I guess we should just start by saying those initial prayers again. That's always the way to start. So if you've got your prayers that we used yesterday, just the same ones. So if you haven't got them, just say something to Jason or to Lynn, I guess. So it's the refuge and bodhicitta, then the homages. Homages, 3 great texts. That's what we start off with. Buddha, Dharma, and find fellowship. I go for refuge, still enlightenment. By my collections, giving and the rest, may I reach Buddhahood for all beings' sake. Sangye chanda sogye chonama, janchu badu dagni kapsuchi, dagin sogye personamti, dola penche sangye dopaso. Supreme of teachers, he who taught dependent relativity, without cessation or arising, no permanent, no oneness and no separateness, no coming and no going forth, the end of fabrication free. Of all the needs, the hero seeking peace to utter peace, who as the Nora path makes those who are, the good of things achieve the world's welfare, and well endowed with goodness sages teach, from this unexpected variety, I bow down to the mother of the Buddha, and here are Bodhisattva companies. Speller of the nets of thought, with bodies both profound and vast, to you whose pure light shines afar, in total goodness I bow down. So thanks to our hosts here, Miro and Monica, husband and wife. They have made a very beautiful place so that Buddha's light can shine as far as Slovakia. Although the verses you heard at the beginning, they are actually in the Czech language. It's a local language, but that's a bit of local color, Czech language. Yeah, so what are the thoughts we need to just get circulating in our minds as we begin this this day's teaching? Oh, well, by the way, the timings are the same as yesterday. So we'll have a break at the top of the hour, in 1 hour's time, short break, and then lunch from 12 o'clock until 2 o'clock. That's Slovakia time, so it'll be 11. No, sorry, no, that'll be, 12 to 2 will be UK time, won't it? So here it'll be 1 o'clock till 3 o'clock. Break time, lunch break. And so in UK we'll finish at 4 o'clock, here at 5 o'clock. So same as yesterday anyway. So let's have a look at what we need to be, first initial thoughts. So I'm going to read a verse from the Song of Experience, or Condensed Lamrim by Tsongkhapa. So you won't find this on paper, I'm just reading this, and you'll just have to kind of listen as well as you can. So this is talking about our opportunity in this life, just as we discussed yesterday, but also we need to think carefully, recollect as often as possible. So Tsongkhapa wrote, "Far finer than a wish-fulfilling gem, this life with leisure found but now, this once. So hard to find, soon lost, a lightning flash. Reflecting in this fashion, realize well, all worldly deeds are but as winnowed chaff. So always seize its essence day and night. I too, a yogi, practiced in this way. You too, who yearn for freedom, do the same." So wonderful words of Tsongkhapa there. What is this wish-fulfilling gem? What is this thing that's finer than the wish-fulfilling gem? Well, the wish-fulfilling gem is, of course, like Aladdin's lamp. You rub on the lamp and you make a wish. The genie appears, you make a wish, you can have anything you want, in worldly terms. So whatever it is you want from this world, you want whatever, a house with a gold-plated roof. Whatever it is, a life of ease and comfort. The wish-fulfilling gem can give it to you, but that's only the material things. That's only the wishes that belong to this world. But this precious life we have, this precious opportunity we have, it's far, far finer than that. This precious life we've got is an opportunity to make our, to make our claim on Buddhahood, to make progress on that path. So that's far, far superior to anything that, the genie from Aladdin's lamp could provide for us. But of course, it's up to us. We don't just get it by having this precious life. This precious life is an opportunity to work towards that. So we have to realize what we've got to do and what we've got to abandon doing, what we've got to do, what we've got to achieve or try to achieve, what we've got to lay down imprints for, and then, what we must put by and restrain from. So, Tsongkhapa lower down, he says also very beautiful words, I think. All worldly deeds are but as winnowed chaff. So that's, to me, is a very strong line. You're up in the Himalayas or somewhere where people still farm with very simple methods. They don't have big tractors and they don't have anything but yaks and them pulling their plows, the yaks, and to separate the wheat, the grain from the husk. They just have animals going round a post in the middle of the threshing ground, and the animals are driven round this post. They're all tied together, the donkeys, the milking animals, and they all have to walk round and round this post, and the grain is underfoot, and so the animals press out the grain from the husk just with their feet. And then after they've done that, then the people have to get there, and they take their winnowing baskets, and they kind of dig the grain and the chaff onto their winnowing baskets, and hopefully there's a bit of a breeze, and as they shake the baskets, the grain drops to the ground, and the winnow chaff just blows down the valley. So it's a very kind of beautiful scene at harvest time, when people are reaping, the goodness of Mother Nature, and this is how they are separating the grain from the chaff. And of course, the excited children, what are they doing? They're chasing after the chaff. The chaff goes flying in the breeze, and it's kind of making these excited patterns, whirling around, and the golden grain is falling to the earth, but the children are happily chasing after the chaff. So we don't want to be like that. We want the golden grain that has fallen to the ground. So that's the valuable thing. But you're mistaking. You see, you're chasing after the chaff instead of, getting the grain in your hands, because that's your real nourishment. So that idea is very, very appropriate for, the traditional farming kind of a society that Tsongkhapa came from. So that's what I have to do with this precious life, seize its essence. That's what we're trying to do today. So very welcome. Yeah, but we don't have a lot of time, so we're not too much time in introductory talk. But we should take a couple of verses from Shantideva, I think, just like we did yesterday, a couple of verses to start us off with. So again, from chapter 8, and this will be verses number 129, 130, 129, 130. Chapter 8. So 129. Whatever happiness within this world all comes from wanting others' happiness. Whatever suffering within this world all comes from wanting happiness for me. And 130. Is there any need for lengthy explanation? Childish beings look out for themselves. Buddhas labor for the good of others. See the difference that divides them. So we don't just want to be thinking of, getting the golden grain for ourselves, separating the chaff from the grain and having, nourishment for ourselves. We want to be thinking of, all other people, all other creatures, all other species. They're just as important as I am. Whatever rights I have, they have too. If we have any rights at all, then theirs are, as significant, as important as mine. So that's not just a sympathetic message that we must have, some kindness for others. We must try to help them, for their sake. But Shantideva is saying all the joy in the world comes from helping others. All the joy in the world comes from that attitude of thinking about the other's welfare. Even if we are just trying to be virtuous, not so much in the Mahayana way of great compassion for all beings, but just so that we can get out of cyclic existence for our own selves, we have to do virtuous actions. We have to make sure that our virtuous actions are many and our negative actions are very few. So what makes a virtuous action? It's an action done out of consideration for others. We avoid harming them, even if we're not actively helping them. We avoid killing. Yeah? We avoid sexual misconduct. We avoid stealing. This is just out of respect and kind of concern for others. So any virtuous action is going to be sort of in relation to others, and it is from the ripening up of the good karma, doing virtuous actions, that all the happiness in the world arises. So karma ripens in the feeling aggregate. So our happy feelings in samsara, whether they are the trivial, slight ones or the great, fulfilling ones, they all come from the ripening up of our previous virtuous actions. And then, just switching the whole thing round. So whatever suffering within this world all comes from wanting happiness for me. Yes, we have to be practical and look after ourselves and, be responsible and, do sensible things which will benefit us. But, as soon as we make ourselves more important than anybody else, as soon as we have this sort of self-cherishing mind, as soon as we become me becomes, capital letters, me, then we start to over-exaggerate our own importance and forget about, the happiness or suffering of others. And that's when we start doing negative actions. That's when we start going down the opposite path. And when all that ripens back on us, then it ripens back as suffering. So all the happiness in the world, all the suffering in the world comes from whether we're being, considerate to others or not. Yes, and then in verse number 30, then he's Shantideva was again sort of pushing us and sort of persuading us onto the Bodhisattva path. Is there any need for a lengthy explanation? Childish beings look out for themselves. So the ones who are childish, it means they're not just sort of silly and uneducated, but you might say spiritually immature or something. Spiritually immature. People who don't know what they're doing, in terms of a path of practice. So those beings are just worried about themselves and always trying to do things for themselves. Again, concentrating too much, exaggerating their own kind of emotions and dwelling in their own kind of self-pity or unhappiness. I've got to do this because it's benefit for me. It's too bad if it harms others. But Buddhas labor for the good of others. Buddhas became Buddhas by working for sentient beings. That's how they did it. And that's why they became Buddhas, in order to benefit other sentient beings. That's the whole purpose in going for Buddhahood. That's why they travel such a long path with such heroic striving, because other sentient beings are their greatest concern, their primary concern. But see how happy they are, by working for the benefit of others. You think, oh, well, they don't have any time to enjoy themselves, or that's not, that's so self-sacrificing. How could I be like that? Yes, it might seem like that, and there is hardship. Nobody's denying that. But if you, concentrate on benefiting others, if you concentrate on working for others, then all the happiness you could actually want will come for you as well. Working for others is the best way to get your own happiness. And the proof of the example of that is the Buddhas themselves, or somebody like the great Guru Dalai Lama, or something like that. Yeah, so working for the good of others, very fulfilling, not just a duty. Okay, so that's just something to start us off with. Sort of, get our minds trying to really seriously get our minds on the path, progressing toward this beautiful state of Buddhahood. Not just talking about it, but actually, trying to make that, direct our heart in that direction. Yeah, so we haven't got a lot of time. We better get on with things. So yesterday we talked about impermanence all day, most of the day anyway. We introduced the Four Seals, then we talked about all conditioned phenomena or compositional phenomena are impermanent. So all very good. I hope that was some good of interest to people. We were kind of rushing at the end, yeah. But if you want to ask questions on that sometime during today, say after lunch, have a question session. So if you have any questions on impermanence, it's possible to discuss it further. And we can even have a meditation on it if people would like that. But today I said I would concentrate mainly on the fourth seal, which is Nirvana is peace. This also has got a interesting load of interesting sort of details and maybe not something that people talk about so often. So it's good to bring it in as maybe a slightly more sort of more novel topic or something. I don't know how you Dharma practice goes, but it's maybe one of the ones that anyway. It's the one we'll concentrate on today, and hopefully now today we're going to read from the text more closely. See, Gen Larimpa's discussion of impermanence is all very good, but it's quite long. It's about half the book, actually. He spends about half the text just talking about impermanence, the first seal. So it was a bit long, and he's got a lot of side arguments, and he's taking up issues in texts which, if you're not familiar with the philosophical background, it's a bit difficult to follow. I'm not saying this Nirvana is peace bit is easy, but there's no harm in having something that you won't understand it immediately, or just gives you something to think about. And I think it's a bit easier to follow, and it's much shorter. So I don't know if we'll get to the end of it, but see how we get on. Just going a bit closer to the text than yesterday. I hope that's okay. Okay then, so we're on page 60, if everybody's on board. Got your texts? And I am going to be referring to one other document, not immediately, but if you have it handy, it's called More Nirvana Points. So that should have been sent to you by chat, or not before the weekend began, but well, maybe just before the weekend began. So if you've got that handy, have you got that one? More Nirvana Points. Okay, well, I'm going to refer to that quite soon, I think, actually, the first paragraph maybe. But just have it ready. But I'm going to start off by looking at the book. So number 4, Nirvana is peace. Nirvana is peace. So Nirvana is a Sanskrit word, of course, and it comes from the verb nirva. So nirva, that's a verb which means blowing out, or blowing, or extinguishing. I'm not saying that's necessarily what nirvana means, but that's the meaning of the word. So there can be different things that the word means, that's where the word is coming from. But of course, in somebody's philosophy, they might have given it a slightly different meaning than the literal, everyday meaning. So, but that's kind of the background of the vocabulary there. So with regard to the meaning of nirvana, being peace and virtue, there are 5. Number A, identifying the nature of nirvana. B, the way to actualize it. That means the way to bring it out, the way to experience it, to enter it or something, the way to make it real or actual for you. C, the cause of attaining it and the cause which establishes it. So in Tibetan, you've got the word cause coming twice. So the cause of attaining it and the cause which establishes it. So I've translated it as cause twice, but the first cause means like, what's the cause of attaining it? Well, what's the method of attaining it? Understand it like that. And the second one is the cause which establishes it. Well, that's more like, what's the reason? What's the evidence which establishes that there is such a thing as nirvana? So it's a cause in the sense of, what is the proof, or what is the evidence which would establishes that nirvana exists. And number D, the reason why it is irreversible. So once you get to nirvana, you don't reverse out of it. You get there and you can stay forever. It's not just like a 2-week holiday. You can, you go there and never come back. And E, analysis of whether it is conventional or ultimate. The 2 truths, conventional truth or ultimate truth. So nirvana, which is it? Some discussion at that point, you see. So Gen Lamrimpa isn't just giving you one view of the highest school, which it might be the simplest thing for simple people like us. This is the view of the highest school. So this is the view that we are going to give you, he's got a bit of debate going on. So when I say the view of the highest school, what would you understand by the highest school, Tim? Highest Buddhist school that in terms of Tibetan Buddhism? Can't hear you, Tim. Have you got your microphone switched off? Still can't hear you.
Right, I'm unmuted now. The Prasangika school, I think he's referring to for the highest school.
And that's as a branch of what school?
The Madhyamaka school.
Yeah. So you've done tenets, have you? Basic program and all that?
I haven't, sadly not yet. I've done some study.
Yeah, I heard you had the basic program sort of starting off or going off in Leeds, but maybe...
We do, it's due to start next year.
Oh, next year, okay, yeah. Great. Well, that contains, reviews of different types of Buddhist, different Buddhist groupings, which you study to sort of contrast with each other. But yeah, so the highest school would be the Prasangika branch of the Madhyamaka school. Okay, that's Sanskrit. In English, we can say the consequentialist branch of the middle way school. So these philosophers like Nagarjuna, they're following the middle way school, and people who come after him in his lineage, like Chandrakirti and Buddhapalita. These are the famous Indian Madhyamaka scholars, and it's that branch, the consequentialist branch of the middle way school, that found became most suitable for the Tibetans. They found that the most logical, the most profound. So to this day, through Tsongkhapa up until the present, Dalai Lama, I call it the Dalai Lama tradition, but Dalai Lama calls it the Nalanda tradition of study. That is the highest view. So that's the view that's, Gen Lamrimpa is putting over as our view, the best view, but he's contrasting it with the views of other people. So the other schools, I don't know if we need to name them, but we could mention the Vaibhasikas, we'll call the Great Expositionists, or the Sautrantika, the Sutra followers. They have a different view. And there's also the mind-only school, by the way, the Chittamatra, but they're not really mentioned here. Yeah, so we have to, be patient. So first of all, he's going to give a view of a different school and contradict it, refute it, and then he's going to, he gives our system straight away. Sorry, he gives our own view straight away, but then he goes on to discussing other views. So please be prepared for that. In fact, maybe we should read the first paragraph of this More Nirvana Points document that you should have. Have you got that handy? I must say that the people who are listening live here, they haven't got that document. They haven't got the latest edition of that document. The first paragraph only went in after I'd sent it out to the people here, so it went in a bit late. So the people who are listening live here in Slovakia won't have that first paragraph, but you who are on screen, I hope you will.
Geshe Losel, it's been shared through the chat, so everybody who is online has got a copy of it.
Yeah, but the people who aren't online, they're upset now because they haven't got it.
My apologies.
No, it's the people who are here who aren't online. Yeah. Not your fault. I'm going to try and send it by email now. I should have. Hold on, emergency. So that one person who's translating from Czech to Slovakia could do with it. See.
You could share the screen, Geshe Graham, so that people can see it if they're...
Oh yeah, that's an idea. We were just talking about that, weren't we?
I mean, even I could, so people can see it.
I've sent it to you by email now, Tenzin. Yeah, let's do a screen share. We haven't done that yet. Exciting. Are you? Yeah, that's it. Cool. That was it. That was it. Show us it. What have you done with it? Yeah. Thank you, Jason. That's good for the for the people who've got, you know, you've done it. I was going to try that. Have you got it, Anila? So it's just these guys over here. I'm sorry, you haven't got your computers with you. It's just for people who really like aren't you know, clued in about this kind of discussion between different schools. But people who are, like the people I've been teaching here a bit, they won't be so kind of confused. It's just an overview of what Gen Lamrimpa is doing in this first part of the text, just so people won't feel they're completely confused by his way of, you know, arguing. So simply, it's just saying in the first paragraph, Gen Lamrimpa gives the view of Nirvana of the middle way consequentialist school. So that comes at first. Just a quick description. So this is given on page 60, which is where we are now. On the other hand, the other Buddhist schools the consequentialists are arguing against here identify Nirvana in a different way. And their sort of definition or presentation of Nirvana is analytical cessation, which is the complete abandonment of the afflictive obscurations. So that just means analytical cessation. It means cessation, but cessation through reasoning, you know, cessation through meditation, cessation through, you know, kind of your getting rid of the defilements in your mind through, you know, practice and following the path. We can talk about, say, the cessation of hunger in your body, you know, after you've eaten a good meal or something. That's a cessation. But it's not an analytical cessation. Analytical cessation is cessation through reasoning, you know, through meditation, through practice, through understanding. Yeah, so that's all that means, I think, basically. Which is the complete abandonment of the afflictive obscurations. So the afflictions, so the afflictive emotions and afflictive ignorance. Yeah, so these are our hang-ups. As we said yesterday, you know, ignorance is the big criminal, the big culprit, the big, you know, one who's ruining all our hopes for complete happiness. And from, you know, the basic root ignorance come the other afflictions, which are more like, sound more like emotions, afflictive emotions, such as, you know, anger, attachment, desire, craving, you know, irritation. So those are the main ones. But then we can also mention things like, you know, depression or anxiety, or, you know, fear and pride, and kind of, you know, hang-ups like that. So in the end, they all, you know, need the root ignorance, grasping at things to inherently exist to get going. So the project of getting to, you know, out of samsara is the project of destroying, you know, the root cause of samsara. Yeah, so we can talk about afflictions leading to unskillful karmic actions. You know, that leads up to ripening up as being thrown into more samsaric rebirth. So if you remember that quotation from Nagarjuna yesterday, he was saying just that. So he's just talking about the way we get into cyclic existence, and also by implication, the way we can get out of it. Our ignorance leads to, you know, afflictive emotions that stir up our minds. And so we reach out and try to gain happiness by actions which aren't necessarily very skillful, because we're too worried about ourselves. So we're doing actions to benefit ourselves, even if they are harmful or, you know, destroy other people's hopes of happiness. So they know that's negative actions. Even if we do good actions, even if we try to help others, if we still have this clinging to a self, then yes, it's a virtuous action, but it only ripens up within cyclic existence. It only ripens up as temporary happiness within cyclic existence. It doesn't ripen up as freedom from cyclic existence altogether, which is what we really like. So even if we want to do virtuous actions, we still have to, you know, do them out of an understanding of selflessness. And then those virtuous actions become, you know, more and more directed out of cyclic existence instead of just pleasant results within it. Yeah, so that's really the one of the key essential features to understand about abandoning samsara, getting out of samsara, and gaining entry into nirvana, is getting rid of these afflictive obscurations. If we don't have the afflictive obscurations, we don't do negative and unskillful karma anymore, and any karmic seeds that we have in our minds that are capable of throwing us into another life in samsara, those karmic seeds can't ripen up, because at death time, when it's time for one of those karmic seeds to ripen up, if we don't have any desire and attachment in our minds, if we don't have any clinging to cyclic existence, brought about by this self-grasping, then none of those karmic seeds ripen up. So we just don't take another rebirth. We don't get hung up on, the same, going around in the same circuit, because we don't have any attachment, grasping, or craving, or no ignorance, grasping at inherent existence. Then we can remain, free from the compulsion to take rebirth again. So we're out of samsara. Yeah, so that's basically what we're talking about when we're talking about abandoning the afflictive obscurations. That's our program. Yeah, so then somebody who has abandoned thoroughly and completely the afflictive obscurations, then that's nirvana. So more details to add, but that's that gets started off. And then the last sentence there, the main fault the consequentialists accuse the other schools of is, so this is the consequentialists argue against these other views of nirvana. So the big fault that the consequentialists are accusing the other schools of then, it's not exactly what we've been talking about, but they assume, the other schools, according to the consequentialists anyway, these other schools, they assume that when a person passes out of his last life into nirvana, then that's the end of the person altogether. So it's not just, oh, I've got rid of my obscurations, my afflictions, so now I'm going to dwell happily in nirvana. But these lower schools, according to the consequentialists anyway, they're saying that when you reach nirvana, actually the continuum of the person ends. Not just your afflictions, but the actual person is no more. So that's kind of a very final, a very kind of complete sort of blowing out or extinguishment, isn't it? So you think, well, why did they think that? Well, it's apparently what they did think, or what they do think, those people who are still following those views. But we'll have to think about that. We'll look at it. We don't just take what the consequences, we don't just take what the consequentialists say and say, okay, that's how it is. We have to investigate. Is what they are accusing the other schools of, is it true of the other schools? So we can check that. We don't exactly know who people like Nagarjuna was arguing against, because he was writing, at least 1800 years ago. So we don't exactly know who his opponents were. So we can find people in the modern world who practice, Buddhism that isn't in the Nalanda tradition. They're not following so-called Mahayana Buddhism. They're mainly the Theravadan tradition, aren't they? So they're alive and well in Burma and Thailand and Ceylon, places like that, Sri Lanka. So we're not saying that those people, the Theravadins, have exactly the same view as the people that Nagarjuna was criticizing. But it's interesting to compare. You see, their view of nirvana, according to their Pali tradition, which isn't, the same as our Mahayana Buddhism that's gone to Tibet, and then, comparing that with the tradition of Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, Tsongkhapa, and indeed our Dalai Lama, and just seeing, comparing views there. So that's what we try to do a little bit if we have time. But, these things require a bit of detail and a bit of thinking. So may not be able to get down to too many conclusions, but at least we're opening the subject up, right? Okay, well, I think that's enough for the for that screen, Jason. If you want to click it off. Hopefully, most people have got the document with them anyway. Sorry, you guys. Okay. Yeah, a late correction to that document. I thought I'd put the paragraph in just to make it a bit easier for people who are not used to this kind of a presentation of a text like this. Anyway, so we're back on page 60 of Gen Larimpa's document. So we'll whiz through a few of these sections now, I hope. So A, the nature of Nirvana. So that means the essential meaning of Nirvana. How should we understand Nirvana? And Gen Lamrimpa uses the Ocean of Reason commentary. So that is by Tsongkhapa. And it's a commentary on Nagarjuna's, wisdom stanzas. Nagarjuna's longest work, his greatest work on wisdom, the wisdom stanzas, or the stanzas on the middle way. And on chapter 25 of that text by Nagarjuna, those verses, is on Nirvana. And Tsongkhapa's commentary is, probably the best that you'll ever get, and it's a magnificent commentary. That doesn't mean it's all so easy to understand. It's easier to understand than Nagarjuna, but he has his own way of, going into complications and really sorting things out. So he says, how should we take Nirvana if we are from the consequentialist school, then, the middle waders? How should we understand? And he says, taking Nirvana as the reality of a mind where the seeds of the afflictions have been abandoned and the appearance of the appropriated aggregates has subsided. So plenty to explain there if you're not familiar with the Buddhist vocabulary. So how should we take Nirvana? We take it as the reality of a mind. So reality here, as the note says, means ultimate reality, i.e. emptiness. Okay, so in the middle way school, Nirvana is emptiness. It is an emptiness, let's say. Not just any old emptiness, not the emptiness of inherent existence of pot, not the inherent emptiness of inherent existence of me personally, but the emptiness of inherent existence of a mind, not the inherent emptiness of inherent existence of any old mind. No, the emptiness of inherent existence of the mind where the seeds of the afflictions have been abandoned. I'll just stop there. Okay, so try to make it clear the difference between the lower schools or the other schools and our consequentialist school. The lower schools are just saying the sheer abandonment of those delusions, the sheer abandonment of those afflictions in somebody's mind. That's Nirvana. And we had that example yesterday, didn't we? What would you say? An absence of a dollar bill stuck to my hand there. Just the mere absence of the dollar bill. Right? So the person who's got to Nirvana, it's not like they've got rid of dollar bills sticking to their hands. They got rid of the afflictions in the mind, you see. They've taken the afflictions and they kicked them out of the mind. Yeah? So then they kick them out of the mind like you kick a thief out of your house and then you lock the door, you see, so then the thief can never come back, right? So they've got rid of the illusion, so that like the house of their mind is empty of the afflictions, right? So that mere absence of the afflictions. And it's not like just the manifest afflictions, or there's no manifest anger, or there's no manifest desire in my mind. We also talk about the seeds of the anger and the seeds of the attachment. See, they've got to be gone too. Right now I can claim, I'm not angry, and I'm cool, I'm calm, I'm not angry, but I've got sort of the potential to get angry still there in my mind. As soon as some bad circumstances come up, as soon as something unwelcome comes up, I easily get angry. So I've got the potential, I've got the seed of anger in my mind still. See what I mean? So I've got to get rid of that seed as well. It's not just the manifest, actual anger, but the potential of the seed to get angry. So you've got to get rid of that. So you're getting rid of the afflictions and their seeds, you can say. And the afflictions and the seeds, so altogether, those two taken together are the afflictive obscuration. The obscuration in your mind that prevents you from getting out of samsara and actualizing nirvana. Yeah, so that's the lower school's view. It's just that mere absence, just like the mere absence of a dollar bill in my hand, the mere absence of the affliction. But the consequentialist is saying that's not quite it. It's the emptiness of the mind where the seeds of the afflictions have been abandoned. So the consequentialists are insisting that the nirvana has actually got to be emptiness. The emptiness of the mind that is free from the afflictions. So the mind is fought against the afflictions, and it's like they've kicked out the thief of the afflictions from their house. They've locked the door so the thief can't get back in. So then the mind is free of afflictions. But no, the consequences say it's the emptiness of that mind that is nirvana. So that's the big difference between these two views. Well, that's one big difference anyway. The other big difference is whether the person continues. Once you reach nirvana, does the person continue, or does the person not continue? So the Mahayanists and the consequentialist middle wayers, they say, yes, even though you reach nirvana, there's some sense in which the person continues. It won't be your physical aggregate. It won't be like this dodgy old samsaric body. That won't continue. That dies eventually. But when the person dies out of their last life, then their mind is still continuing in nirvana. It's still continuing in freedom. Whereas the lower schools are saying, yeah, when you get to nirvana, the person just sort of, is no longer somehow necessary. You've got rid of the afflictions. You've got rid of the torture and the pain and the suffering of being born as samsara. So then, you go to a state beyond being a person, which doesn't involve being, having the stream of your consciousness just dissolves or something. So what do they actually try to say? So we'll have to look at that. What do they say from their point of view? But as far as the consequences are concerned, it's an ending of the continuum of the person. So that's another point of disagreement, you see. So 2 points of disagreement, the main points. One is the consequentialist thinks that nirvana is emptiness, and the other schools think it's just the mere absence of delusion, not specifically the emptiness of inherent existence of the mind, but the mere absence of delusion in the mind. And the other schools, the consequences are saying that the continuum of the person does continue in nirvana, but the other schools are saying that there's no need for the continuation of the person in nirvana. It's just there's sort of your continuum sort of dissolves into the unconditioned of nirvana or something. Okay, so that's just a lot of explanation. So we can only go very slowly. Too bad. So would anybody like to ask a question at this point? Am I going too fast or not?
Can you hear me, Geshe?
Yes,
Hello?
I'm not sure who's speaking.
It's Radek. Sorry, I have to use iPhone for some time today.
Oh, Radek, welcome.
Hi, just wanted to ask quickly, when you said that other lower schools than the Prasangika assert that Nirvana is the absence of the afflictions, delusions in the mind, do they mean also by that also absence of the main delusion, ignorance?
Yes,
Which
when
would,
we say absence of afflictions here, we mean absence of
all the afflictions.
emotions like the attachment and the anger, but also complete eradication of this ignorance grasping at the inherent existence.
Which will be then realizing emptiness, right? And
yeah, so you're able to realize emptiness, fully and completely. You don't have any more grasping at inherent existence. You might have other types of ignorance, you know. It's not saying you've got rid of every ignorance, because you're not a Buddha if you just gone to your individual Nirvana. Maybe you've not got the sort of omniscient consciousness of the Buddha. We're not necessarily talking about that. We're talking about getting rid of the self-grasping, that ignorance. Okay?
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, so that's maybe one point we need to mention here, just before we go for our tea break. So here we are, you know, in this text, as I may have mentioned yesterday, talking about a sort of common understanding of Buddhism, of, you know, wherever you would expect to find it, in whether you're in Thailand or Burma, those type of countries practicing Theravada Buddhism, or when you're in Tibet practicing, you know, Mahayana Buddhism. One is in the Pali tradition, one is in the Sanskrit tradition. So there's a sort of common views which are sort of you'd expect them to be found in all of those places. Like Jenny mentioned, at least in the Theravada tradition, they have this common presentation of three of these 4 points. So they don't actually bring the Nirvana as peace into their 4 seals. They just sort of stick with 3 points, 3 marks of existence. But you know, you'd still expect to be able to go to a monk or a teacher in that tradition and say, well, what's Nirvana? What about it? What's it like? And you'd you'd expect to get some kind of, you know, guidance. But the emphasis in those schools is sort of more like the individual liberation. Somebody who's going to their own personal peace, and they're not necessarily striving for full, complete, perfect Buddhahood. Yeah, so it's your main goal, or the main goal of most people, nearly all beings, that they simply go to their own, you know, a peaceful Nirvana, and they leave the sufferings of the world behind, and that's their great achievement. But of course, the Mahayana take on that, the take of, you know, people like Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, the people of the consequentialist school, but also people of the mind-only school, the Mahayana schools, more associated with the Sanskrit language than the Pali. They made their goal, they made their path, the Bodhisattva path, and they made their aspiration is towards full Buddhahood. So you aren't just going to your own private peace, you aren't just going to your own solitary Nirvana, which might be easier to achieve, but no, you put off just going to your own personal freedom, and you stay working, you know, taking rebirths in samsara, working as a bodhisattva, working for the highest liberation of all, you know, the highest sort of nirvana of all, which is full, complete, perfect Buddhahood. So, you know, there's 2 possibilities. And in the Mahayana schools, yes, of course, there are people who just go to their individual liberation. That's fine if that's, you know, if they don't have the kind of the courage or the, you know, the determination or the stamina to go for the full Buddhahood. So they do go to the simpler, easier escape from samsara of, you know, their own personal nirvana. So there are people who do that. But the path is really praising, you know, the texts are really praising those who, you know, take the longer path and show greater courage and go all the way to full Buddhahood. So that isn't so much mentioned in this text. Of course, it comes in. You know, it's not as if it's just completely ignored. But so the Nirvana we're really talking about here, which is the one, you know, the common understanding of all schools, is this: how do you get to this personal Nirvana? How does one individual being get out of samsara without sort of stressing too much about how do we all get to Buddhahood? You know, to Buddhahood, we need more than just abandoning these afflictive obscurations. To get to Buddhahood, we need to abandon another set of obscurations. So they're the obscurations to omniscience, or the knowledge obscurations. So that's another kind of you know, extra kind of task that the Bodhisattva has. They don't just get rid of this self-grasping, grasping at inherent existence. They get rid of all false appearances. They get rid of all kind of much more subtle, you know, karmic kind of, you know, sort of defilements or karmic kind of wrong appearances, you know, sort of not so much grasping, the self-grasping from the side of the being grasping the thing, but they get rid of all the false appearances too. So that's a greater task which needs more meditation and more powerful bodhicitta kind of compassion motivation to go with it. So we're not so much talking about here, we're talking about this going to this personal individual nirvana. So I hope that some of you kind of heard of that before, so it's not such a kind of a complicated thing to understand. But that's a point that maybe I should stay, thanks to Radek's question there. Okay, so we're already thirsting for a cup of tea, I think. We've had an hour already. Somebody looks like they want to ask a question, but...
Yeah, may I ask a question? Hello?
Maybe we should go for a tea break and ask it.
Okay, cool.
During the tea break, if you want to. Tea break time, tea break. Okay, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. See you at 7 minutes past. The difference. So as like I said, it is the absence of the dollar bill stuck to my hand. So that's just an absence. That's not this emptiness of inherent existence we're talking about when we're, talking about emptiness of inherent existence. The wisdom realizing that is the wisdom that removes our self-grasping ignorance. So that wisdom is the great antidote to the self-grasping ignorance which hangs us up in samsara, right? So we can talk about this one of the lower schools. We can talk about just like a
Oh, can't hear you anymore.
You're on mute.
It's not letting me.
no?
There you are, yeah. For some reason, it switched on to mute, but you're
Yeah.
back online now.
And I tried to unmute it and it wouldn't let me. So, yeah.
Maybe a sign, maybe we not to hear this.
That's funny. I never touched the computer. Did it just flick onto mute by itself?
I don't know.
I don't know at what point it flicked onto mute. I don't know. Anyway, so I've got to start my explanation. Okay, so just like you can say, there's no cat sitting on my table. Yeah, so there's sheer absence of the cat, right? So when you kick the thieves out of your house, there's no more thief in your house. Absence of thief in your house. So when you kick the afflictive emotions and the ignorance out of your mind, then you've got a mind that's got no more ignorance or afflictive emotions in it. Yes, you can say it's empty of afflictions. It's empty of those troublesome emotions and so forth. But that's not the kind of the emptiness that the prasangikas, the consequentialists are talking about. So that's all very well. But then what the consequentialists are saying is nirvana, is that mind which is free of those emotions, free of those afflictions, free of those delusions. Then you've got to meditate on the emptiness of inherent existence of that mind. So that's what nirvana is, the emptiness of inherent existence of that mind.
So how can they argue then that the person's continuum still exists? Because it sounds to me like the first point, the emptiness of mind from the afflictions, necessarily leads to more a concept of Buddhahood than Nirvana.
I don't know about that, but yeah, to be clear about what we mean by emptiness of inherent existence then. So our ignorance that keeps us stuck in samsara is grasping at things to have a way of existing which is by their own power, by their own nature. The sense in which things exist, from their own side. So that's kind of a very powerful sort of a kind of misunderstanding which leads us into all sorts of trouble. that's where all our delusions and emotions are kind of coming from, this one root. But to describe exactly what it is, I haven't really tried to do that this weekend. And you know, it is one of the seals. You know, the third seal is selflessness, emptiness. So that the realization of that is you know, very much on the agenda when you're talking about the four seals. So whether you're thinking about external objects, or you know, your own mind, or just your own person, or any other person, any phenomena in the world, they all empty of this inherent existence, this a kind of false way of being. And yet, when we look around and see things, they have, you know, they all appear like that. They all appear to be inherently existent. They all appear to have this mode of existence, which is not relying on anything else. They're just there, you know, by way of their own, you know, power, their own nature. They have a way of being which isn't relying on anything else. And that appears to us, just kind of because our ignorance is so deep that we have these false things appearing to us, not just they appear occasionally, but all things appear like that to us, you know, all the time. And then we go and grasp, we go along with that appearance, and that's when we develop, you know, desire, attachment, anger, and so forth. You know, by believing that false appearance, it leads us, you know, into trouble. And so you have to sort of, you know, find examples in your own life where you realize that that's what's happening. And you know, it's often times when you are kind of emotionally upset, or you know, desire is getting stronger in your mind, a kind of an exaggerated type of desire, and that's when you can see a bit more clearly this this sort of grasping at inherent existence, you know, coming out. And,
but in Nirvana, a mind in the Prasankhika school, a mind that realizes emptiness, meaning has no longer any problem, like there is conceptual and direct realization of emptiness. So it knows that, you know, mind knows that it's not inherently existing. How can that mind perceive the continuum of the person? Then, because it would mean that mind perceives that the person's continuum is inherently existing, which my understanding of the Prasankhika school is that, no, that's not the case.
yeah, so the person has realized emptiness, they're able to meditate on emptiness, but that doesn't mean the person goes out of existence. It just, they're a person who's got the correct way of looking at things. So that's a very different way of existing from what we, you know, grasp at as being the way people exist. We misunderstand. But we're not saying the person ceases to exist. And we're not saying that the person suddenly becomes empty of inherent existence. Everything's been empty of inherent existence, you know, since whenever. It's not like it's, that's the only way things can exist, by being empty of inherent existence. Because they're dependent arising in dependence upon causes, upon parts, upon, you know, circumstances, then nothing is inherently existent at all, and it never has been. So the mind becomes clear with that feature of reality, and then, you know, rests in that clarity. And when you die out of your last life, you remain in that state of peace, that state of freedom from all your, you know, mistaken fabrications. So it's not like the continuum of the mind has to come to an end, but the mind continues to exist, meditating on its own emptiness. You see, so that's a mind which doesn't have to just disappear or, you know, evaporate just because it's got rid of this sort of, you know, fundamental ignorance. The mind continues to exist in like a purified form. You see.
So is this not more the sort of the mind goal? So the mind basis of all is what you're describing, as opposed to the Prasankhika's view. Because if something is non-inherently existing, and everything is non-inherently existing, then when the Heart of Wisdom Sutra says no mind, no mental consciousness element, there is no ignorance, no extinct ignorance, we understand it as if it is all interdependent, then none of them exist from their own side, which means consciousness itself cannot exist. So it seems an oxymoron to say that the Prasangika school then thinks that a person continues to exist. That's my understanding, was that was the mind-only school, the Chittamatra.
The mind-only school is a bit different, yeah. So I'm trying to describe, probably not very well, the Prasangika view, consequentialist view, not the mind-only view. The mind-only view is that all things do inherently exist. So their view of emptiness is a little bit different, a little bit, let's say, more kind of, more simple or something. And the mind-only view, a bit more sort of, easy to understand, and the consequences view a bit more subtle. But yeah, so the point to emphasize maybe in your case is that just because things don't inherently exist, it doesn't mean they don't exist. So just by saying things don't inherently exist, it doesn't mean that they don't exist at all. So that everything is lacking inherent existence from the beginning. Everything is just a dependent arising, it's just dependent related with its causes or its parts, or various other factors and circumstances. And when you realize that, you realize that's the way things are. And but it doesn't mean that actually nothing exists. It just nothing exists by way of its own power. Nothing exists by way of its own independent nature. It only exists in dependence upon all these other factors, like the causes, for instance. Yeah. So when the Heart Sutra is saying there's no form, there's no feeling, there's no discrimination, there's no compositional factors, there's no consciousness, we take that to mean there's no inherently existent consciousness. So the consciousness realizes all that, becomes free of the tangles of samsaric, complications and ignorance. And so then the mind is stably resting, on meditation on the truth. And then you pass out of your last life, and that mind continues. So that's your last life in samsara, I mean to say. So you pass out of your last life in samsara. So you get rid of the gross body, which is all the kind of nerve ending that's giving you all this pain. So then after that, you're just a mind, yeah? You're still a person, but you've got this continuum of mind that goes on. You've still got the aggregates of the consciousness and the feeling and the discrimination and so forth. But you just got rid of the, contaminated form aggregate. So the person carries on in Nirvana, according to the consequentialists, meditating on, the person, the mind meditates on its own emptiness. Whereas for the lower schools, even the continuum of the person ceases to exist. There's no more need to talk about person anymore. You just vanished into the unconditioned or something. Okay, so just the sheer absence of delusions or afflictions in your mind, that's one thing. But here the consequentialist is saying it's not just that. First of all, the mind gets rid of those afflictions, but actual Nirvana itself is the emptiness of that mind, which has got rid of the afflictions. And that means the emptiness of inherent existence of that mind. The lack of inherent existence of that mind, which has got rid of the delusions. That is what we would call actual Nirvana. Yeah, so you can see it's a sort of a tricky subject, but it sounds like you've thought about it before, and you're getting there. So that's great, Laura. Anyway, I think as a contrast to all of us talking together, I want to go into the breakout groups now, just for 10 minutes, just try and sort of imagine what Nirvana is actually like. We try to give some sort of technical details, and some of the debates, but it's also important, to try and feel what it would be like if you were in Nirvana. What would it be like? What would Nirvana contain for you, or what should it contain? What would you like to be there in Nirvana? Yeah. So we're not talking about absolute total Buddhahood, but you can bring Buddhahood itself into your discussion if you want to. But just to share, the first level of freedom from samsara, where it's just you who's got out of samsara. Okay, you can bring in perfect Buddhahood, but you don't have to think about that, just individual Nirvana. So the question is there on your chat now, what should there be in Nirvana? Please say how you think it should be, or, what would you like to see in your dream Nirvana? If you designed Nirvana, to say what it should be like, what would you, how do you think it should be? So would you like to put us into these breakout groups, Lynn? Or
Yes,
Jason, whoever's doing it. Just 10 minutes, like last time, 10 minutes.
Right, I'll send everybody to breakout rooms. For those of you who were here yesterday, I've moved things around, so you should be with different people. And once you're in the breakout room, you won't be able to see the chat. So please just make sure that you're clear of the question, clear on the question before you go. And Katya, just to say, because you've got two connections with your computer and your phone, it will try to send you to a group twice, but don't worry, just go with the one that you know works and ignore the other connection. Okay, and I'll give you a warning before the 10 minutes finishes. Right, thank you. Here we go.
Okay, is everybody with us again?
Everybody's back with us now, so whenever you're ready to carry on, that's fine.
Yeah, great. So is it possible to imagine Nirvana? What you know, how would you, what's your take on Nirvana personally? Kind of, that's what I'm interested in. For anybody we haven't actually had talk with so far, some people I haven't met. Lindsay, have I met you before, Lindsay? Microphone, I can't hear you.
Hi. No, but we haven't met. We haven't met Geshe. I'm part of Jamyang Leads.
Yeah. So did you have any discussion on Nirvana?
Yeah. Radik and myself discussed what it might be like, and we came to similar conclusions. That we talked about the fact that Nirvana sometimes in the school we study tends to not get glossed over, but we talk about Nirvana in terms of personal liberation and then go, but we've got to focus on all sentient beings, so therefore we don't think too much about personal liberation and other than enabling us to help other. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not being very clear. So we've not really thought about it too much in terms of, well, I haven't really, because personal liberation sort of, well, we don't do that in this school. We have to be enlightened in order to help other people, but the whole aim is other people, all sentient beings. So, but we said, so personal Nirvana would be a mind free of all delusions, obscurations, a mind, peace of mind. We tried to think about it in a day-to-day practical sense of Nirvana would be, a mind free of all negativity, and that we said the tiny little glimmers we get of that maybe during shamatha meditation or other experiences, to imagine that ultimately Nirvana would be that consistently, and but at a completely different level that we don't even acknowledge, we can't imagine.
Can't even imagine, yeah.
Yeah, that even the tiny little light bulb moments we get of clarity, maybe that would be consistent. So to that Radhik was explaining, he said that was a great source of inspiration, that yeah, if we can just achieve that now, then maybe that would give us the inspiration and motivation to continue to practice.
Okay, thanks very much, Lindsay. Nice to meet you.
You too.
Can we move on to somebody else? Thank you very much. What about Tom Pratt? Are you part of the Leeds group? Tom?
No, no, I'm from the London group, but I've only been there since February. But yeah, we were just discussing. I was asking a few questions. But are there different types of Nirvana from different schools? You know, the Bodhisattva way, does that lead on to a different type of Nirvana? And is it Theravada, in Theravada tradition, is that also different, and how that would be? And I also was interested to know what the Pure Land, how that was related to Nirvana, and people were saying that was a place that would help you to, where the Buddha is, that helps you progress to Nirvana in a more streamlined fashion. Yeah, just trying to think of anything else. Yeah, I think that's about all I can remember.
Yeah, well, thanks, Tom. I mean, it's yeah, different types of Nirvana. Yeah, well, like Lindsay was saying, there's full enlightenment. You can call that kind of Nirvana. We might say that's non-abiding Nirvana, to use a special term, a special technical term. So the full enlightenment of the Buddha, who's got, then he's empowered to, be really connected with other beings and reach out to other beings, help them, appearing on the earth in whatever way is going to help other beings. For instance, as the teacher, the guru, so that's a very fully potentialized, fully empowered type of nirvana. But the individual nirvana we're talking about is where you just get your own freedom from suffering, and you just rest in that kind of peaceful liberation, not involved with anybody else anymore. But just, you've got your own freedom. What a relief it is, and that's bliss. And these lower schools are saying, well, then at that point, even the continuum of the person just sort of vanishes into the unconditioned or something, vanishes into so sort of a place where you can't even talk about what it's like. So no more continuum of a person. And then yes, the other one you mentioned, so the Theravadins, what they actually think. I'm not an expert what they say, so I don't want to really give their opinions or their kind of reactions, without knowing what I'm talking about. But I've just got a quote or two from their sort of scriptures or their kind of explanations, which we can look at, to contrast. And the Pure Land, like you say, the Pure Land is not liberation, but through your power of your merit you've accumulated in a life like this one, then you get reborn in a place where Dharma practice becomes, much easier. Like you said, streamlined is probably a great word for it. So I don't know much about that style of Buddhism, but it is a central feature of some Buddhist schools to aim to get to those Pure Lands. Not so much encouraged by our Dalai Lama tradition, I don't think. That's sort of sort of be in a place where you can be useful for beings. If you're in a place where everything's pure and wonderful, then what help are you to the other beings who are still in distress? You're learning the path. You get to Buddhahood really quickly so that you can be empowered to help others. But Dalai Lama doesn't really stress the practice of getting into a Pure Land so much, although there are plenty of references into different texts. Okay, maybe one more person who we haven't spoken to today. Well, what about you, Dawn? We just said hello this morning. Have you got anything we can?
Hi. I think we were saying, I was saying, I like the definition of all pervasive suffering as kind of being a feeling of being like homesick. And
like what? Sorry.
like feeling homesick, you know, like even when things are going well, even when, you know, if things aren't going well, you don't quite feel like you are where you should be. So that kind of feeling of nirvana is about being home, really, and not, you know, feeling peaceful, and, you know, life is going on, you know, good things happen, bad things happen, but they still quite penetrate in the same way. You know, you sort of got a feeling of calm and peace and being home. So that was kind of my definition. I don't want to speak for Laura. I think hers is a little bit more zingy. So, you know, that car motion, but there's still a load of jumping and dancing fish, sort of quite nice.
Zingy. Laura likes a zingy nirvana.
Yeah, she wants a zingy nirvana.
What's that? Sunny beaches and Spanish wine.
Yeah, I think so.
Sorry, Laura. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to do it.
So yeah, that's what we discussed, Geshe.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Nirvana, they stress the peace angle. They don't stress the sunny beaches and the, you know, the Spanish wine so much. You know, that would be nice too, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Right.
Yes, what?
Can I ask a question on it? So, if nirvana is, you know, the cessation of suffering or emancipation of it, then surely what you get, you know, some stuff is left over. And so I'm assuming all your positive emotions are still kind of left over, because they're kind of based more on reality, like compassion or whatever. You know, you've got to still have, I don't know, there's got to be like kind of a positive side to it, because nirvana is more of a point of negation, isn't it, of what is removed. They don't often talk about what's left afterwards.
Yeah, so that's the intriguing thing, you know, and there are those people who go to solitary nirvana according to the according to our Mahayana tradition, you know, which is based on the perfection of wisdom sutras, you know, those sutras which kind of the Tibetans took to heart, and people like Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti and Tsongkhapa kind of realize, maybe relying on more than any other sutras, they do say it's possible to go to solitary nirvana and realize that it's a bit inferior, you know, realize they could do better than that, and then they want to join the bodhisattva path, or else they're sort of persuaded to join the bodhisattva path by, you know, Buddhas who see what's going on in their minds in solitary nirvana, that they aren't so happy there, or that they feel that isn't the complete, you know, fulfillment of their possibilities, even though it is very peaceful and just how Dawn likes it. You know, you don't have to get up early in the morning and go to work. You can just have a lie-in all day. Sorry, Dawn. You know, but yeah. So they end up coming back out of solitary nirvana and rejoining samsara, not because they suddenly developed any ignorance or you know, negative karma ripening, but it's their choice. You know, they want to get back and follow the bodhisattva path because they feel it's more fulfilling. It's got more possibilities. So if you look at the document, the more points, more nirvana points, there's actually it talks about that. Somebody who, like, they get to solitary nirvana and then they come out, so they do have some positive feelings, you know, like you're asking about. So that's interesting to note that. So I put that into the document. I wasn't really going to talk about it, but if people look at that document, more nirvana points. The later quotations are from the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So it's about somebody who's saying, you know, we're contrasting their personal nirvana, which is all very peaceful, with well, why can't I be a bodhisattva now? I'll try that instead, you know. But I don't know, like, we've got 10 minutes before lunch. So maybe we could, at this point,
ask a question.
Well, perhaps you could keep it till after lunch, Tim.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
You're very welcome, but you know, I thought I'd just go back to the other school's view of nirvana,
apart from the consequentialist. So that's what the next portion, the next section of this More Nirvana Points kind of additional document is offering. Okay, so there's a quotation from The Island by Ajahn Pasano and Ajahn Amaro. So it's another description of Nirvana, you see, from the Pali Canon. So it's just interesting to read that and see how we respond to that eloquence, even if, you know, we don't get down to the finer points of how is it different from the consequentialist view. How is it different? What's the difference? You know, but remember the consequentialist types are saying, when we analyze what you're saying, it sounds like there's the continuum of the person disappears in Nirvana. And Dalai Lama is quite specific about that within his interpretation. He says, yes, they're saying that the person the person's continuum does come to an end. So Nirvana is actually like an extinction. It's not like peace. It's not just like you're at rest and the heart is at peace, but there's no more heart to talk about. So I can give you a quote from the Dalai Lama on those lines, you know, later, maybe in the afternoon, but there won't be as much time. But for now, we'll look, you know, just sympathetically at what the Theravadins actually say about Nirvana. This is the personal Nirvana, which most people go for in their school. Most people don't go for full enlightenment. This personal Nirvana is the highest the highest experience. But, you know, the individual's personal Nirvana and the Buddha's grand Nirvana aren't so much different for them. Remember that in the Theravada school, you know, once the Buddha's gone to parinirvana, once he passes out of his last life, it's not like he's coming back here to teach, or he's not reaching back to psychic existence. He's like he's passed beyond psychic existence, and he doesn't really seem to have much more contact with it. Even the Buddha, never mind the individual, you know, practitioner of a more ordinary kind. So that they don't have any more connection with suffering beings in samsara, it seems. So they just remain to inspire people, but they don't actually kind of reach out with a compassionate hand to beings who are still suffering. But anyway, don't let me prejudge it. You know, just see what it says. So I'm going to read the first quotation there. It's a bit long, but you know, to get the feel of the eloquence, I think we should do that. So from The Island by Ajahn Pasano and Ajahn Amaro. Nirvana is described precisely as profound, hard to see and hard to understand, unattainable by mere reasoning. Yet, in the same passage, Buddha also says that Nirvana is to be experienced by the wise, and in the suttas, he gives indications of its nature to convey some idea of its desirability. The Pali Canon, Pali Canon, offers sufficient evidence to dispense with the opinion of some interpreters that Nirvana is sheer annihilation. So they're obviously sensitive to some criticisms that they've heard, like just that we've voiced, you know. So they don't want Nirvana to be interpreted as sheer annihilation. And also they don't so much value the opinion, even the more sophisticated view that Nirvana is merely the destruction of defilements and the extinction of existence. So that cannot stand up under scrutiny. So, you know, even if you say that Nirvana is primarily the ending of the afflictions, the absence of the afflictions in your mind, and also the extinction of existence, you see. So it's not just like extinction of samsara existence, but the extinction of existence altogether. So they're objecting to that interpretation of what they believe. Probably the most compelling testimony against that view is the well-known passage from the Udana that declares, with reference to Nirvana, that there is an unborn, unbecome, unmade, unconditioned, the existence of which makes possible escape from the born, become, made, and conditioned. The Majjhima Nikaya characterizes Nirvana in similar ways. It is the unborn, unaging, unailing, deathless, sorrowless, undefiled, supreme security from bondage, which the Buddha attained to on the night of his enlightenment. Its preeminent reality is affirmed by the Buddha when he calls Nibbana the supreme foundation of truth, whose nature is undeceptive, and which ranks as a supreme noble truth. Yeah, so that's you know, a very eloquent attempt to inspire people in their sort of students and followers about, you know, the worthwhileness of striving for Nirvana. And it is that quotation, I think, you know, where at the end of there it says, when Buddha calls Nirvana the supreme foundation of truth, whose nature is undeceptive, which ranks as a supreme noble truth. So that is what is Chandrakirti is actually quoting in his Gen Lamrimpa is using to you know, discuss this question of Nirvana in his own text. Anyway, you see, we've only got a couple of minutes left now, so no time to do much more than just one brief comment. So if you go into the unconditioned, that means that must mean you stop being a human being, because a human being is conditioned, arising, you remember? Conditioned, composed, compounded phenomena, that which arises out of cause and condition. So if you go into the unconditioned, it means you become, you're no longer changing. You're no longer under the influence of cause and condition. So how can you be this changing stream of consciousness, this continuing stream of you know, impermanent evolving consciousness? You've gone into the unconditioned, so it's impossible to talk in those terms. You know, so where are you? When you say you know, Nirvana is the supreme noble truth, it's like the truth of cessation, and there's like, you know, if it's a supreme noble truth, you know, that then to the consequentially has to be emptiness. So Nirvana has to be emptiness. If it is a supreme noble truth, it is like the one noble truth which, you know, is you know, reality. It is the one which exists as it appears to the mind of the person on the path. The other three noble truths, the truth of suffering, truth of origin, truth of paths, you know, they always appear to exist inherently when they don't. But the one noble truth that exists as it appears for somebody who's on the path, when they're meditating on emptiness directly, that is just reality, that is emptiness itself. So according to the you know, the consequentialists, they interpret Nirvana at this point to be emptiness, because it is the supreme noble truth. It must be emptiness. But I don't think these the Theravadas are quite looking at it like that. They don't want it to be so precisely, you know, defined. You merge into the unconditioned, and at that point, you know, you can no longer talk about categories of it exists or it doesn't exist. It is this or it is that. It is good or is bad. All those categories melt away, and you are in a state free of those, you know, mental fabrications and discriminations. You're free of those proliferations. So they're trying hard to sort of make it sort of, you know, sort of a different as from samsara as possible, and it's kind of, you know, can be inspiring in its own way. So I'm not just sort of dismissing it. So this is impossible. Oh, the person no longer exists in Nirvana. So it's just good for them anyway to get a sense of what the Theravada tradition is saying, you know, in their own eloquent words. That's good to see. Anyway, let's stop there. We've opened up the discussion, like with impermanence, you know, there's so much to talk about, but so little time to talk about it in thoroughly. So we see you after the break, and at that time we'll do some meditation, we'll have a story, but we'll try to wrap up a bit about Nirvana. But if somebody's got questions about impermanence as well, you know, we'll have to try and deal with a couple of those at least, you know, because people might be, you know, still having thoughts about that. Anyway, I'll see you in a couple of hours' time at 3 o'clock, which is 2 o'clock by UK time. Okay?
Thank you, Geshe Losel. We'll see you then.
See you soon.
Thank you.